On March 22nd, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Esmond Ford, he laid in Parliament the 44th annual report of the Ombudsman. Now, this morning I'm joined by Ombudsman Rajmanlal Joseph. He's with me to discuss this report. Good morning, sir. Pleasure to have you here.
Your listeners and viewers.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here. As I get into this conversation, my first question is, though we are very much well aware that there are delinquent business owners who do not perhaps pay their NIS of their employees, as their contributions as they should, how would you describe the efficiency of the NIB in ensuring that employers are doing their part?
Well, let me put it this way. The NIB has had tremendous challenges in dealing with employers who one may consider as delinquent. Mm-hmm. We know this because people complain to us that their contributions are not remitted to the NIB on time or at all. And it is really a failure on the part of the compliance section of the NIB. My suspicion is that the COVID pandemic sort of put a damper on their compliance unit functioning properly because officers are not able to visit business places in person, you see. And that is the way you get people to comply with the requirements of the law. So that, yes, there have been some drawbacks in terms of compliance by the NIB, but over the last 2 years, one could understand why. But that is not an excuse for not following up.
But prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, would you say that the compliance department were very much efficient and effective in carrying out their duties and responsibilities?
Not as we would like it to be. There's always been difficulties with compliance. I don't know why it is that they don't pursue these matters vigorously, because at the end of the day, it is the average citizen who suffers tremendously, particularly when they make applications for retirement benefits. And remember, when members of the public who are contributors to the system cannot have their contributions accounted for, their benefits are withheld.
Yes. Because
remember, the law says you have to have certain number of contributions into the system before you are entitled to either a pension or a grant. Mm-hmm. And until that could be verified, then they're not going to pay you.
Has there been any sort of reasonable explanation that has been given from or by the NIB as it relates to their inefficiencies and their shortfalls?
Well, we get the normal, we have been getting the same responses over the last 2 years. The difficulty in going out to do work, visit employers, to get them to comply, look at their books to see whether the contributions are actually deducted and why it is not remitted. So that is the reasons that are advanced for the, if you might call it, inefficiency of the system.
Mm-hmm. But is it fair to even refer to it as an inefficiency of a bureaucracy, or is it more than that? Is that just bandaging it very easily?
I would prefer to say that it is an inefficient system, because even if you had, let's say, the continuation of the lockdown system, there must have been and there are ways to get employers to comply. Mm-hmm. If you could entertain applications from people online, why can't you get employers to do the same? Mm-hmm. So that it's not a real excuse, okay? However, the only part of that approach that has some validity is where employers move their registered offices on a regular basis, for whatever reason. And then you cannot get to them easily. That's to my mind the only valid reason for not ensuring that there is compliance.
Well, based off of the findings that were stated in the report. Do you believe that the NIB is aware of the provisions as it relates to enforcement
yes,
against
are.
delinquent employees, as stated in the
They
Act?
are. Yeah. They have been in existence since 1972 or thereabouts. So, I mean, that's a long time for an organization. And they have been doing it since then. So that they are totally aware of their powers under the law. It's just that they don't seem to be able to get it right.
And that's precisely why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because even though they've existed since 1972, sometimes you wonder, just based off of even the discussion that we're having, even the report that was laid, whether or not they're fully aware as per their legislative powers.
There's no doubt in my mind that they are aware.
Yeah.
They have a fairly efficient legal department because I hear from them on a regular basis, okay? Particularly when I have to issue summons to their executive director to appear before me. Oh yes, I get...
And that happens quite often?
In 2022, yes. I have had cause in the last year to issue and hear 150 summonses, yes. Remarkable for my office.
Wow. Certainly doesn't make your job any easier.
No, it isn't, because, look, the reason why the NIB is of concern to my office, and to me personally, is the fact that oftentimes I have had to summon the executive director to appear before me before I got a plausible response to the complaint. Because they wait until a day or two prior to the hearing of the summons to send an explanation and or to tell me the matter has been resolved in favor of the applicant.
Well, so we have to take a quick break here on the program,
Sure.
but that's a good way to stop. Actually, I'm now being told that we don't have to break, so my apologies for having to interrupt you. So let's continue the conversation. Not sure what happened there, but this is television. If it has been established that the NIB, especially the compliance department, has been inefficient in their duties and responsibilities, and we are aware that there are delinquent business owners and operators who are not doing their part in terms of their employees' NIS contributions, how do we go about resolving this issue when the players involved are not doing what they're supposed to do?
To my mind, Parliament has to now intervene and indicate to the NIB by an amendment to the Act that they have a particular time frame when a complaint is made against an employer to deal with it. Simple. For instance, under the Freedom of Information Act, you have 21 days to come to the Ombudsman, and we have 30 days in which to deal with your complaint under that Act. Why can't they do the same thing for the National Insurance Board?
Now, I'll get to that in one moment with respect to the National Insurance Board, but is 30 days enough for your office to try and probably deal with these complaints that are brought forward?
No, that is under the Freedom of Information Act. But
Yeah.
I was just using that as an example to show you why it is sometimes time limits are essential. Because it establishes the parameters within which the public authority has to operate. And they know now that if they don't, or they breach these time limits, then there are certain consequences to follow.
Well, let's actually go back now and focus more on this time period. Is 90 days, as per the NIB, for processing retirement claims. Is that justified? Is that fair?
In some instances, you can say it's unfair. My experience is that oftentimes people who have just retired desperately need that pension or grant because oftentimes they are experiencing tremendous health challenges. I mean, I have had a complainant who could not get his pension benefits, and he had a mild stroke while waiting for this money to be processed. Had he gotten his money on time, he may have been able to visit his cardiologist and get the appropriate treatment. I don't know.
And have there been instances of individuals whose claims have taken maybe years
Yes, they have been.
And they've
Yes,
actually
they have
passed since that.
Yes, they have been. We have had a case in our report, our 44th report, where it took almost 14 years for a claim that was made by an injured employee to be processed. And there were two public authorities at fault here. The employer, which was the Elections and Boundaries Commission, and the Solicitor General. It is when I took office and I looked at this file, I found it was totally ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And I promptly issued a summons to the Solicitor General, which was unheard of prior to my taking office. But we got the response we wanted. 2 days prior to the summons hearing, I got word from the Solicitor General that yes, she provided the advice to the EBC and indicated to me the quantum recommended to the injured party. By the time we contacted the injured party, the person had passed away.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard something having to issue a summons, or is it that you, in order to always get a response, you always have to issue a summons?
No. There are some public authorities who live up to their responsibilities and they act promptly. Mm-hmm. But you have others who are reluctant, who prefer not to deal with matters that they are supposed to deal with. And that is precisely why the Ombudsman was created by the framers of our Republican Constitution, to ensure that there is some watchdog mechanism over public authorities. Mm-hmm. Had it not been for this entity called the Ombudsman, there would be no answerability by public authorities. Mm-hmm. And remember, taxpayers' money fund the functioning of all these public authorities. Mm-hmm. So why should they be immune from redressing the complaints of citizens, provided, of course, that the complaint is legitimate?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see why it is that one should get a free pass. Mm-hmm. Okay.
What about the availability of information from the NIB to the public? Is it easily accessible by the public?
It has become rather difficult. Oftentimes we get complaints where people tell us in no uncertain terms that, look, they have made the application to the regional offices, they've provided all of the information requested in terms of documents and so on. And when they went back, they can't find the file, documents are missing, they now have to go and search to get copies of documents already submitted. And then they go 3, 4, 5, 6 times repeatedly to be told that the matter is processing. At that point, they normally come to the Ombudsman.
And has this become music to your ears?
Yes, it has.
That's very unfortunate, sir, because I'm trying to figure out exactly who should be the one responsible for, because I know you said Parliament should intervene.
No, what I'm saying is this. Because there has been a basic failure of the compliance unit of the NIB, my view is that the corrected Parliament could amend the legislation to ensure that there are timelines for investigating these complaints and processing them and dealing with them.
Yeah. No.
Okay? That is the way that you get public authorities to function efficiently. Mm-hmm. If you don't establish timelines, then it's up to the public authority to determine how they're going to approach it. And they may very well take a very lackadaisical approach, mm-hmm. as some do. Others are efficient.
If an individual is dissatisfied with the outcome of their claim that has been processed by the NIB, if they are dissatisfied with the decision of the NIB, do they have any opportunity or do they have any power to try and appeal such a decision?
Yes, they could. They have two approaches. You could appeal to the National Insurance Appeal Tribunal, which is an independent body created by the same National Insurance Act. Or you could approach the High Court to challenge a decision. But the appeal to the National Insurance Appeal Tribunal is on facts. Mm-hmm. The question of law has to be dealt with by the High Court.
But individuals aware that they are allowed to appeal such decisions?
Look, once a decision is against the applicant, they should be told by the regional office or whichever office they are dealing with that, look, this is the decision of the National Insurance Board and you have a right to appeal. Mm-hmm. The form to appeal should be given to them promptly, okay, because they have a particular time frame, you see what I'm getting at, mm-hmm. to appeal, you see.
Yeah.
And if they don't appeal within that time frame, then you lose your appeal mm-hmm. to the National Insurance Appeal Tribunal. Mm-hmm. The jurisdiction of the High Court, of course, is much more extensive, and you can deal with it in a number of different ways. And each approach to the High Court has time limits also. Mm-hmm. So if you wish to have the decision judicially reviewed, you have 90 days. If it is that you are looking at a private law action against the NIB, then usually it's about 4 years.
Wow, that's still a lot of time, isn't it?
Yeah, you have a lot of time to deal with it at the High Court level in a private law matter. Yeah. Not so if you wish to have it judicially reviewed.
Now, I didn't even start the conversation by discussing the role of the Ombudsman, but I think just based off of what has been said thus far, I think the importance of the Ombudsman and how crucial it is, that cannot be understated, just based off of what you're saying this morning, because the information that you're sharing is very much important to those who are viewing. But as I conclude, my final question to you is, how would you overall describe the efficacy of, and this is a borrowed term, the efficacy of our social protection machinery here in Trinidad and Tobago?
In some instances, I would say it's fair, and in many other instances, it's poor. Mm-hmm. I don't think that these entities have developed sufficiently among their staff the level of social consciousness necessary to be efficient. Because if they had, then they may know that the people that they are doing, the cohort of the population they are dealing with, are the most vulnerable. We are talking about retired people. We're talking about people over 65. And they have a number of vulnerabilities. Some of them can't move around physically. Mm-hmm. Some have congenital medical problems that they're dealing with. Why should you not process these people's applications promptly? Mm-hmm. And that is something that bothers me tremendously. So I take a dim view when these entities don't process citizens' applications promptly. Mm-hmm. My policy now is not to send reminder notices to these agencies. You get our first letter, you don't respond, you could expect a summons to appear before me. Mm-hmm. And there are consequences for not appearing.
Would you care to just elaborate on what some of those
consequences were? There was one
were?
particular public officer, a very senior officer in a regional corporation, who did not attend. And I promptly issued a prosecution against that person, as I'm entitled to do. Okay? The outcome was that they reached out to me and they assured me that all of the processes are in place to ensure that my summons reach promptly to the attention of the CEO. Mm-hmm. And based on those assurances, I then relented and I caused the action to be discontinued. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want to prosecute people unnecessarily.
Of course.
I do it to ensure that you comply with the requirements of the law, because nobody's above the law, sir. Mm-hmm. Whether you're a CEO, permanent secretary, or whoever, okay, executive director, I don't care who you are. If I issue a summons to you to attend and you can't, please contact the office. Mm-hmm. Let us know why it is that it is difficult for you to be here. Mm-hmm. Make arrangements for your second in command to attend and answer questions as to why you are not dealing with the complainant's complaint.
I think a term that you just used, the level of social consciousness that is necessary, that is a very key point for the entire discussion. I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning on the program, so it certainly has been very much informative, and I think whilst we are aware of the issues associated with the NIB, we now have a deeper understanding as per what those issues exactly are, what may be causing them, and the role of the Ombudsman in trying to resolve such issues. So thank you very much, sir, for your time.
You're welcome, sir, and I want to thank you for allowing me to be here so that members of the public could know the views of the Ombudsman on their complaints and how their complaints receive our attention.
Certainly, sir. Well, thank you very much. Keep up.
You're welcome.